Hey guys, tonight we're ascending the marble steps of Mount Olympus, where the air shimmers with divine energy, and every footfall echoes with the weight of immortal drama. You're climbing toward a realm where gods throw lightning bolts like party favors and turn mortals into animals for sport. The summit ahead pulses with golden light, and you can already hear the distant sound of celestial arguments echoing through clouds that never rain. You probably won't survive this journey if you were actually mortal. The divine radiation alone would turn your bones to ash before you reached the first checkpoint. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time, because I love seeing where in the world you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing at the base of the most famous mountain in ancient Greek imagination, though geographically speaking, the real Mount Olympus is just a 9,570-foot peak in northern Greece, where modern hikers complain about the lack of Wi-Fi. The mythological version you're approaching tonight exists in a dimension where physics takes a permanent vacation and family therapy would be $1 trillion industry. The ancient Greeks placed their gods here because mountains naturally point toward the heavens, making them perfect, divine real estate. Plus, the altitude meant fewer unexpected mortal visitors dropping by to complain about their problems. As you climb higher, the ordinary world fades behind you, replaced by architecture that defies every engineering principle ever conceived. Columns stretch impossibly tall, crafted from materials that exist nowhere on Earth. The marble beneath your feet feels warm, almost alive, pulsing with the collective heartbeat of 12 major deities who have been feuding for millennia. You pass gardens where flowers bloom in colors that don't exist in the mortal spectrum, their petals occasionally whispering secrets in languages that predate human speech. The air itself tastes different here, richer somehow, like breathing liquid starlight mixed with the faint aftertaste of ambrosia. The Greeks didn't just invent these gods for entertainment. They created them to explain a world that seemed chaotic and unpredictable. Why do earthquakes happen? Poseidon's having a bad day. Why does winter exist? Demeter's depressed about her daughter. Why do people fall in love at inconvenient times? Aphrodite's bored and stirring up trouble. It's like having a cosmic sitcom where the characters control the fundamental forces of reality, and the laugh track is thunder rolling across the sky. Historians still argue whether the Greeks genuinely believed these stories, or simply used them as sophisticated metaphors for natural phenomena. But the emotional truth embedded in these myths has outlasted empires. You reach the first plateau, where lesser gods and divine servants scurry about their business. A few minor deities nod in acknowledgement you're clearly not mortal anymore, having survived the initial ascent. The transformation happened gradually, your human limitations dissolving like sugar in divine rainwater. Here, time moves differently. Minutes stretch into hours, or perhaps hours compress into heartbeats. operating on immortal time now, where a conversation might last 3 centuries, but feel like a pleasant afternoon chat. The palace complex ahead sprawls across the summit like a city designed by committee, if that committee consisted entirely of beings with unlimited power and questionable judgment. Each major god has claimed their own section, resulting in architectural chaos that somehow achieves perfect harmony. Zeus's section dominates the center, naturally, with walls that crackle with barely contained electrical energy. Hera's quarters adjoin his, though a massive garden buffer zone suggests some serious marriage counseling issues. The other gods have arranged themselves in a careful social hierarchy, with everyone jockeying for position, like the world's most powerful homeowners association. You notice the silence isn't really silence at all. It's filled with the subtle sounds of divine activity. Somewhere, a lyre plays itself, the melody shifting based on Apollo's mood. The distant ring of hammer on anvil suggests Hephaestus is crafting something magnificent or terrible, possibly both. Ocean waves crash against invisible shores as Poseidon maintains his underwater palace through some form of interdimensional plumbing. The very air hums with potential energy, as if reality itself is holding its breath, waiting for the next divine decision that might reshape the world below. As you approach the main entrance, you realize you're about to witness the greatest family dysfunction in mythological history. These aren't distant, unknowable deities. They're immortal beings with very human emotions, infinite power, and absolutely no adult supervision. They love, hate, scheme, and forgive with equal intensity, making decisions that affect millions of mortal lives based on personal grudges, romantic entanglements, and the occasional fit of divine pique. Welcome to Olympus, where the gods are just like us, except they can level cities when they're having a bad day. You're walking through the grand entrance of Zeus's palace, where the very walls seem to pulse with electrical current, and the air tastes like the moment before a lightning strike. The king of the gods has decorated his realm with captured storm clouds that hover obediently near the ceiling, occasionally rumbling with barely contained thunder. You can feel the static electricity raising the hair on your arms if you still had mortal arms, which you don't. But the sensation persists anyway. Zeus himself sits on a throne carved from a single piece of crystallized lightning, and his presence fills the room like a barely contained hurricane, deciding whether to make landfall. The story of how Zeus claimed this throne reads like a mythological version of Game of Thrones, except with more cannibalism and fewer dragons. His father, Kronos, had a rather unorthodox approach to family planning. He ate his children immediately after birth, having heard a prophecy that one of his sons would overthrow him. It's the kind of parenting strategy that would make even the most dysfunctional modern family look like a sitcom. When Zeus was born, his mother Rhea finally said enough and pulled the old switcheroo, feeding Kronos a rock wrapped in swaddling clothes instead of the actual baby. Kronos apparently wasn't the most attentive eater because he swallowed the stone without noticing the distinct lack of crying. Zeus grew up in secret on the island of Crete, raised by nymphs and nursed by a goat named Amalthea, which explains a lot about his later dietary preferences for ambrosia and nectar. When he came of age, he returned to challenge his father in what became known as the Titanomachy, a 10-year war between the old gods and the new. The young god's first strategic move was convincing his father to vomit up all the previously eaten siblings, which must have been the most awkward family reunion in history. Imagine the small talk. "Hey, brother, how was the inside of Dad's stomach?" "Oh, acidic. Very acidic." The weapon that secured Zeus's victory was his famous thunderbolt, forged by the Cyclopes in gratitude for their freedom from imprisonment. This wasn't just any lightning bolt. It was a concentrated package of divine wrath that could level mountains, split the earth, or simply make a very dramatic point during family arguments. The ancient Greeks believed lightning was Zeus literally throwing his temper tantrums across the sky, which explains why they took thunderstorms so seriously. You wouldn't want to be caught outside during a divine mood swing, especially if you'd recently forgotten to sacrifice a bull in the thunder god's honor. You watch as Zeus demonstrates his power, casually generating a small lightning bolt between his fingers like a cosmic fidget spinner. The electricity dances across his palm, and for a moment, you glimpse the raw force that shapes weather patterns across the Mediterranean. Historians still argue whether the Greeks developed their understanding of Zeus's personality from observing actual storms, or if they attributed storm-like qualities to their king of gods because his mythology demanded such dramatic flair. Either way, the connection between divine emotion and natural phenomena runs deep in Greek religious thought. The palace itself reflects Zeus's dual nature as both a wise ruler and an impulsive force of nature. The main hall features a massive table where he holds court with the other Olympian gods, though the seating arrangement changes frequently based on who's currently in favor or disgrace. The walls are covered with murals depicting his various victories, romantic conquests, and the occasional disciplinary action against mortals who have gotten too uppity. It's like a combination presidential library and personal shrine, maintained by someone with unlimited power and a healthy ego. Zeus's administrative style involves a surprising amount of delegation, which makes sense when you consider he's responsible for maintaining order among 11 other major deities, who each have their own spheres of influence and personal agendas. He's like the CEO of a company where every department head has supernatural powers and daddy issues. The sky god spends most of his time mediating disputes between his fellow Olympians, making executive decisions about mortal affairs, and trying to keep his wife Hera from discovering his latest extramarital adventure. It's a job that requires the wisdom of Solomon, the patience of Job, and the relationship skills of a United Nations diplomat. Notice that despite his reputation as a stern patriarch, Zeus has a surprisingly modern approach to problem solving. Rather than simply smiting everyone who disagrees with him, he often employs creative solutions that reveal both his intelligence and his sense of humor. When King Lycaon served him human flesh as a dinner test, Zeus didn't just kill him, he transformed the king into a wolf, creating the world's first werewolf and establishing a precedent for punishment that fits the crime. When mortals became too wicked, he didn't destroy them directly. Instead, he sent a flood and let natural consequences do the work, though he thoughtfully provided advance warning to the virtuous Deucalion and Pyrrha. The thunder echoes through the palace as Zeus prepares for his next decision, and you realize you're witnessing the moment-by-moment creation of weather patterns that will affect thousands of mortal lives. Every gesture of his hand, every shift in his mood, translates into atmospheric pressure changes that will bring rain to farmers, storms to sailors, and clear skies to festivals. Being the god of the sky means being responsible for the basic conditions that make human civilization possible, which is probably why Zeus developed such a complex personality. Imagine having everyone's outdoor plans depend on your emotional state. You're entering Hera's domain within the palace, where the air itself seems to vibrate with barely contained fury, and the Daker suggests someone who takes interior design very personally. The Queen of the Gods has arranged her quarters as a monument to marriage, family, and the consequences of betraying both. Peacocks strut across marble floors, their iridescent feathers catching light that seems to shift color based on Hera's current mood. You can feel the weight of her attention before you see her. It's like being studied by a predator who's also a lawyer, calculating exactly how much punishment you deserve for crimes you haven't committed yet. Hera sits on a throne that perfectly matches her husband's in grandeur, but exceeds it in subtle intimidation. The armrests are carved with scenes of domestic harmony, but if you look closer, you'll notice the happy couples all have the slightly glazed expressions of people who have learned that arguing with the Queen of Heaven is a career-limiting move. Her crown shifts between gold and silver depending on the angle, because even her accessories refuse to be pinned down to a single identity. She's beautiful in the way that avalanches are beautiful, magnificent, powerful, and absolutely not something you want to be caught in the path of. Mythology surrounding Hera reads like a masterclass in how not to handle marital problems when you have unlimited cosmic power. As the goddess of marriage and family, she's theoretically responsible for protecting the sacred bonds between spouses, which makes her husband's legendary infidelity a professional insult as well as a personal one. Zeus's romantic resume includes mortals, nymphs, titanesses, and at least one occasion involving a swan costume that's best left unexplored. Each affair represents a direct challenge to Hera's authority, and she's responded with the kind of creative vengeance that would make Machiavelli take notes. Her most famous target was Io, a mortal priestess who caught Zeus's wandering eye. When Hera discovered the affair, she transformed the unfortunate woman into a cow, not just any cow, but a specifically uncomfortable cow, pursued by a gadfly across the known world. It's the kind of punishment that demonstrates both divine creativity and the importance of reading the fine print before getting involved with married gods. The poor woman spent years wandering the earth as livestock, which must have given her plenty of time to reflect on her life choices. Historians still argue whether this story was meant as a cautionary tale about adultery or a primitive explanation for why certain constellations appear to move across the sky. You watch as Hera reviews her latest intelligence reports, delivered by an efficient network of minor deities, nymphs, and enchanted animals who serve as her personal surveillance system. She's developed what modern intelligence agencies would recognize as a sophisticated counterintelligence operation designed to detect Zeus's romantic adventures before they become public scandals. The queen maintains detailed files on every woman who's ever made eye contact with her husband, which in Zeus's case represents a significant portion of the Mediterranean population. It's like having a marriage counselor with access to satellite imagery and the power to turn people into houseplants. The irony of Hera's situation isn't lost on the other gods, who have learned to navigate her moods with the careful precision of diplomats walking through a minefield. As the goddess of marriage, she's trapped in a union that would be considered dysfunctional by any reasonable standard. But divorce isn't exactly an option when you're dealing with the king of the gods. Instead, she's channeled her frustration into becoming the most feared enforcer of moral standards in the pantheon. Other deities think twice before breaking promises, betraying oaths, or engaging in behavior that might attract her attention. She's essentially become the divine equivalent of a neighborhood watch program. If the neighborhood watch had the power to turn lawbreakers into various forms of wildlife. Her relationship with Zeus operates on a level that transcends normal marital dynamics. They're not just husband and wife, they're co-rulers of the universe, engaged in an eternal power struggle that shapes the fundamental nature of divine authority. When they fight, storms rage across the earth. When they reconcile, the weather turns beautiful and crops grow abundantly. Their marriage serves as a cosmic metaphor for the tension between order and chaos, stability and change, commitment and freedom. It's couples therapy on a planetary scale, and the rest of us are just collateral damage. You notice that despite her reputation for vengeance, Hera's punishments often contain an element of poetic justice that suggests a sophisticated understanding of human psychology. When the nymph Echo helped Zeus conceal his affairs by distracting Hera with endless chatter, the queen cursed Echo to only repeat the last words she heard, a punishment that perfectly matched the crime. The nymph who used words to deceive would be forever trapped by words, unable to express original thoughts or emotions. It's the kind of precisely calibrated revenge that demonstrates both divine creativity and a deep understanding of what makes people tick. The peacocks that surround Hera's throne aren't just decorative. They're a reminder of one of her most famous acts of memorialization. When her faithful servant Argus, who had 100 eyes, was killed by Hermes while guarding the transformed Io, Hera took his eyes and placed them on the peacock's tail as a permanent monument to his service. It's a gesture that reveals her capacity for loyalty and gratitude, emotions that often get overshadowed by her more dramatic displays of wrath. The peacock's tail becomes a symbol of how beauty can emerge from tragedy, and how the gods preserve the memory of those who serve them faithfully. As you prepare to leave Hera's presence, you realize you've witnessed something more complex than simple divine jealousy. The Queen of the Gods embodies the fundamental tension between personal desire and social responsibility, between the individual need for happiness and the collective requirement for order. Her story serves as a reminder that even unlimited power can't solve the basic challenges of human relationships, and that some struggles are universal, whether you're a mortal dealing with a cheating spouse or a goddess married to the king of the universe. The thunder outside grows quieter as you move toward the next section of the palace, but you can still feel the weight of her gaze, measuring, calculating, and remembering everything for future reference. You're descending through a shimmering portal that leads directly into Poseidon's underwater palace, where the laws of physics have been temporarily suspended to accommodate divine real estate requirements. The transition from air to water feels like stepping through liquid silk, and you find yourself breathing easily in an environment that should have drowned you instantly. Coral formations spiral upward in impossible geometries, their surfaces encrusted with pearls that pulse with their own internal light. Schools of fish swim in perfect formation, occasionally spelling out messages in ancient Greek before dispersing into seemingly random patterns. The water itself seems more cooperative here, supporting your weight when you need to walk, and allowing you to swim when you prefer to glide. Poseidon's palace stretches across the ocean floor like a city designed by someone who's never heard of architectural limitations. Walls of living coral shift and adapt to the sea god's needs, growing new rooms when he requires space and dissolving unused chambers back into the reef. The central throne room features a massive chair carved from a single piece of black pearl, surrounded by curtains of flowing seaweed that create privacy without blocking the view. Bioluminescent creatures provide ambient lighting, their glow shifting through the spectrum based on the lord of the sea's emotional state. Right now, the lighting suggests he's in a moderately good mood, though the occasional flash of deeper blue indicates some underlying irritation. The god of the sea himself embodies the dual nature of water, capable of both life-giving sustenance and devastating destruction. His beard flows like underwater currents, occasionally revealing glimpses of tiny sea creatures that have made their homes in his divine facial hair. It's like having a portable ecosystem attached to your face, which probably explains why he's so invested in marine conservation. His famous trident rests beside his throne, its three prongs crackling with the power to split continents, generate tsunamis, or simply stir up enough waves to ruin a beach vacation. The weapon was forged by the same Cyclops who created Zeus's thunderbolts, making it a sibling to the most powerful weapons in the divine arsenal. The relationship between Poseidon and his brother Zeus operates like a complex geopolitical alliance between two superpowers who genuinely care about each other but disagree on fundamental policy issues. They divided the universe after overthrowing their father, with Zeus claiming the sky, Poseidon taking the sea, and Hades getting the underworld in what was probably history's most consequential game of rock, paper, scissors. The Earth was designated as neutral territory, which explains why both brothers feel entitled to meddle in mortal affairs. Their sibling rivalry manifests in natural disasters that affect millions of people, making their personal disputes a matter of global concern. You witness Poseidon's daily routine, which involves monitoring ocean currents, managing marine ecosystems, and occasionally checking in on his various romantic interests scattered across the Mediterranean. The sea god's love life is almost as complicated as his brother's, though he tends to favor water-related transformations when pursuing mortal women. His approach to courtship involves turning himself into horses, bulls, or dolphins, depending on the situation and the lady's preferences. It's like online dating, but with more shape-shifting and fewer awkward coffee meetings. The resulting offspring often inherit some of their father's aquatic abilities, leading to a surprising number of heroes who can hold their breath for extended periods or communicate with marine life. The palace's administrative wing houses Poseidon's earthquake department, where minor sea gods monitor tectonic activity and make recommendations for seismic events. The earth shakers' temper directly correlates with geological instability, making anger management a global priority. When he's particularly upset, the tremors can be felt from Sicily to the Black Sea, causing mortals to frantically offer sacrifices and apologies for whatever they might have done to offend him. Historians still argue whether the Greeks developed their understanding of seismic activity from observing Poseidon's moods, or if they attributed earthquake-like qualities to their sea god because his mythology demanded such dramatic geological power. You notice that despite his reputation for destructive rages, Poseidon also serves as a protector of sailors and fishermen who show proper respect for the sea's power. His protection manifests in favorable winds, calm waters, and the occasional school of fish driven directly into nets. However, those who fail to honor the sea god's authority face consequences that range from inconvenient delays to becoming permanent residents of the ocean floor. The god maintains a careful balance between encouraging maritime commerce and reminding mortals that the sea is ultimately his domain, not theirs. The palace's library contains detailed records of every ship that has ever sailed, every storm that has ever formed, and every creature that has ever lived in the ocean's depths. Poseidon's memory of maritime history is absolute and unforgiving. He remembers every sacrifice offered, every promise broken, and every sailor who's ever cursed his name during a storm. It's like having a divine credit rating system where your maritime reputation follows you across lifetimes. The sea god's attention to detail extends to tracking the genealogies of marine life, ensuring that every dolphin, whale, and seahorse can trace their lineage back to to the earliest days of creation. As you prepare to surface from Poseidon's realm, you realize you've experienced more than just divine hospitality. You've witnessed the management of an ecosystem that sustains all life on Earth. The sea god's responsibilities extend far beyond stirring up storms and earthquakes. He's the custodian of the water cycle, the guardian of marine biodiversity, and the ultimate authority on weather patterns that affect agriculture, trade, and human survival. His moods don't just determine whether your beach vacation gets rained out. They shape the fundamental conditions that make civilization possible. The water around you begins to lighten as you ascend, carrying with it the sound of distant waves and the promise of solid ground ahead. You're standing in Zeus's private chambers, witnessing what medical professionals would classify as the most unusual birth in recorded history. The king of the gods is experiencing what can only be described as a divine migraine of epic proportions, clutching his head and producing sounds that make thunder seem like a gentle whisper. His skull is literally expanding and contracting like a cosmic heartbeat, and you can see strange lights flickering beneath his scalp. The other gods have gathered at a safe distance, because when Zeus has a headache, the symptoms tend to affect everyone within a several-mile radius. Even the furniture is trembling, and you're pretty sure the palace's structural integrity is becoming a legitimate concern. Hephaestus, the divine blacksmith, approaches with his massive hammer raised high. This isn't a medical procedure that would be approved by any earthly physician. It's more like cosmic surgery performed by someone whose primary qualification is being really good at hitting things with large tools. The smith god's hammer gleams with the same fire that forges lightning bolts, and his expression suggests he's performed this particular operation exactly once before, which makes him the world's leading expert by default. Zeus nods grimly, apparently having reached the point where being struck in the head with a divine hammer seems like a reasonable solution to his problem. The hammer blow connects with Zeus's skull, producing a sound like a mountain splitting in half. For a moment, the entire palace goes silent, as if the universe itself is holding its breath. Then, in a burst of golden light that temporarily blinds everyone present, Athena emerges fully grown from her father's head, wearing complete battle armor and carrying a spear that crackles with intellectual energy. She lands gracefully on the marble floor, surveys the shocked assembly of gods with calm gray eyes, and immediately begins organizing them into more efficient formations. It's like watching a cosmic version of those corporate consultants who show up and immediately start improving processes that no one realized needed improvement. The goddess of wisdom's unusual birth method explains a lot about her personality and her relationship with her father. Unlike other gods who were born as infants and had to learn their divine abilities through experience, Athena emerged with complete knowledge of warfare, craftsmanship, and strategic thinking. She's like a celestial Wikipedia that gained consciousness and decided to specialize in military tactics and urban planning. Her birth represents the emergence of civilization itself, the moment when human intelligence evolved from simple tool use to complex problem solving, strategic thinking, and the ability to create lasting institutions. You watch as Athena adjusts her armor, which seems to be made from a material that's simultaneously flexible and indestructible. The helmet bears the image of an owl, her sacred animal, whose ability to see in darkness makes it a perfect symbol for wisdom that illuminates hidden truths. Her shield displays the head of Medusa, a trophy from one of her more successful consulting projects involving a young hero named Perseus. The shield serves as both a weapon and a reminder that wisdom can be just as terrifying as ignorance, especially when it's applied with divine efficiency. She's essentially armed with everything necessary to found a civilization or defend it, depending on the situation. The circumstances of Athena's conception add another layer of complexity to her origin story. Her mother was Medes, a Titaness whose name literally means wisdom or cunning intelligence. Zeus had received a prophecy that any child born to Medes would eventually overthrow him, so he solved the problem by swallowing his pregnant wife whole. It's the kind of preemptive action that demonstrates both political savvy and a fundamental misunderstanding of how prophecies work. The unborn Athena continued developing inside her father's head, where she had unlimited access to his thoughts, memories, and decision-making processes. She essentially received a graduate-level education in divine leadership while still in utero. Historians still argue whether Athena's birth represents a metaphor for the development of human consciousness, a primitive explanation for migraines, or a sophisticated commentary on the relationship between intelligence and authority. The story contains elements that suggest all three interpretations might be correct simultaneously. The goddess's immediate emergence as a fully formed adult bypasses the normal developmental stages that characterize human learning, suggesting that some forms of knowledge might be innate rather than acquired. Her birth from Zeus's head specifically, rather than from any other part of his body, emphasizes the connection between wisdom and divine authority. The other gods' reactions to Athena's dramatic entrance reveal their individual personalities and priorities. Hera's expression suggests she's calculating whether this counts as adultery if the mother was consumed rather than divorced. Poseidon appears to be making mental notes about the potential military applications of having a fully armed goddess as a sibling. Apollo looks professionally impressed by the theatrical value of the birth, while Artemis seems to be evaluating Athena's armor for practical hunting applications. Aphrodite's reaction is harder to read, but she's probably already planning ways to incorporate virgin goddesses into her romantic schemes. As Athena takes her first steps in the mortal realm, you realize you're witnessing more than just an unusual birth. You're observing the moment when human civilization gained its divine patron. The goddess of wisdom will go on to sponsor heroes, design cities, and invent technologies that transform human existence. Her birth represents the emergence of strategic thinking, the development of craftsmanship, and the establishment of institutions that allow human societies to grow beyond simple survival. She's the divine embodiment of human potential, fully armed and ready to defend civilization against chaos, ignorance, and the kind of problems that can only be solved by hitting them with a really good spear. You're climbing into Apollo's solar chariot as dawn approaches, feeling the warmth of divine craftsmanship beneath your hands and the promise of a cosmic road trip that will literally light up the world. The chariot itself defies every principle of aerodynamics, being constructed from materials that exist only in the realm of the gods: gold that never tarnishes, silver that sings when the wind passes through it, and gems that store sunlight for redistribution during cloudy days. The 4 horses harnessed to the front are not ordinary animals, but manifestations of fire itself, their manes flowing like liquid flame, and their hooves striking sparks from the crystalline floor of heaven. Their names, Pyrwa, Eos, Ethon, and Phlegon, translate roughly to fiery, dawn, blazing, and burning, because subtlety was apparently not a priority when designing the cosmic lighting system. Apollo himself radiates the kind of effortless perfection that makes mortal beauty contests seem like participation trophies. His golden hair catches light that he generates himself, creating a feedback loop of divine attractiveness that has been causing problems for thousands of years. He's simultaneously the god of music, poetry, prophecy, healing, and the sun, a job description that would be overwhelming for anyone without unlimited cosmic energy and a really good personal assistant. The lyre resting beside his seat occasionally plays itself, providing a soundtrack for the daily journey across the sky. Today's selection appears to be a melancholy piece about unrequited love, which suggests the sun god is still processing some recent romantic disappointment. The chariot's departure from the eastern edge of the world marks the beginning of humanity's daily cycle of productivity, warmth, and vitamin D synthesis. You feel the tremendous acceleration as the horses leap from their celestial stable, transitioning from standing start to cosmic velocity in a matter of seconds. The G-forces would be fatal to any mortal, but you're operating under divine protection that makes the experience feel like riding in a very fast, very luxurious convertible that happens to be powered by controlled nuclear fusion. The Earth spreads out below you like a detailed map, with cities, forests, and oceans passing by in a panorama that shifts from the Mediterranean to regions that won't be discovered by European explorers for another 1,000 years. Apollo's conversation during the journey reveals the surprising challenges of being responsible for global illumination. He must carefully calibrate the intensity of sunlight based on seasonal requirements, geographic location, and the agricultural needs of various civilizations. Too much light scorches crops and causes droughts. Too little light delays harvests and triggers famines. The sun god operates like a cosmic thermostat, making constant adjustments to maintain the delicate balance that allows life to flourish on Earth. His mood directly affects the quality of light, which which explains why some days feel more inspiring than others. You're literally experiencing the emotional state of a divine being translated into photons. The chariot's route takes you over the oracle at Delphi, where Apollo's prophetic abilities are channeled through a mortal priestess who breathes volcanic gases and delivers cryptic predictions about the future. The god's relationship with prophecy is complicated by the fact that knowing the future doesn't automatically grant the power to change it. He can see disasters approaching, romantic tragedies unfolding, and heroic quests ending in failure. But divine law prevents him from interfering too directly in mortal affairs. It's like having access to spoilers for a cosmic drama where you're simultaneously the screenwriter, director, and supporting actor. But you can't warn the protagonists about plot twists that will destroy their lives. The sun god's romantic history reads like a cautionary tale about the dangers of combining unlimited power with poor relationship skills. His pursuit of the nymph, Daphne, ended with her transformation into a laurel tree to escape his advances, which is probably the most extreme example of ghosting in mythological history. The story established laurel wreaths as symbols of victory and artistic achievement, but it also created a precedent for romantic pursuits that end with one party becoming a plant. Apollo's love life is littered with similar stories, women who choose death, transformation, or exile, rather than accepting his divine attention. It's a pattern that suggests even gods can benefit from learning about consent and healthy communication. Historians still argue whether Apollo's daily journey represents a primitive scientific explanation for the sun's movement across the sky, or a sophisticated metaphor for the relationship between divine inspiration and human creativity. The ancient Greeks observed that artistic inspiration seemed to follow patterns similar to solar cycles, periods of intense creativity followed by phases of reflection and renewal. Apollo's dual role as sun god and patron of the arts suggests they understood the connection between light, energy, and creative expression. Modern research has confirmed that natural light cycles affect human mood, productivity, and cognitive function, making Apollo's mythological responsibilities surprisingly accurate from a psychological perspective. The chariot's western descent marks the end of the workday for most mortals, but it's just the beginning of Apollo's night shift as god of prophecy and healing. His oracle processes requests for divine guidance, while his healing abilities work most effectively during the quiet hours when the body's natural repair mechanisms are most active. The transition from day to night requires careful coordination with his sister Artemis, who takes over the sky with her silver moon chariot. Their sibling relationship operates like a perfectly synchronized relay race, with each god handling their designated shift while maintaining the cosmic balance that keeps the world habitable. As the chariot approaches the western horizon, you notice that Apollo's expression has shifted from the confident radiance of midday to a more contemplative mood. The approaching sunset requires him to gradually reduce the intensity of his divine light, preventing the kind of abrupt transitions that would shock both human circadian rhythms and agricultural cycles. It's a process that demands both technical precision and artistic sensitivity, like conducting an orchestra where every note affects the sleep patterns of millions of people. The sun god's mastery of this daily transition explains why sunsets have inspired more poetry than any other natural phenomenon. You're witnessing a divinely choreographed performance that happens to be essential for planetary survival. Horses begin their descent toward the ocean, where they'll rest in underwater stables until tomorrow's dawn. Their hooves generate steam as they make contact with the sea, creating the mist that often accompanies sunset over water. The sight of fire horses diving beneath the waves while pulling a chariot of crystallized sunlight is the kind of spectacle that makes you understand why the Greeks developed such elaborate mythologies to explain natural phenomena. It's easier to believe in divine horses than to accept that a nuclear fusion reactor 93 million miles away is responsible for the daily light show that makes life possible on Earth. You're running through a moonlit forest alongside Artemis, the virgin huntress whose silver arrows never miss their mark, and whose idea of a relaxing evening involves tracking dangerous creatures through terrain that would challenge an Olympic athlete. The goddess moves with the fluid grace of someone who's been perfecting the art of silent movement since before humans discovered fire, her feet barely disturbing the fallen leaves as she navigates between ancient trees. Her bow is crafted from horn and sinew that gleam with their own internal light, and the arrows in her quiver seem to adjust their properties based on the intended target: silver for werewolves, lead for particularly annoying suitors, and simple wood for the everyday hunting that keeps her skills sharp. The forest around you pulses with nocturnal life that responds to Artemis's presence like a well-trained orchestra acknowledging their conductor. Owls hoot softly to announce her passage, while deer pause in their grazing to bow their heads respectfully. The moonlight filtering through the canopy creates patterns that shift and dance with each step, as if the shadows themselves are participating in the hunt. You realize you're experiencing the wild spaces of the world as they were meant to be: dangerous, beautiful, and utterly alive, with possibilities that civilization has forgotten. The air carries scents of pine resin, wild herbs, and the clean smell of water running over stones, mixed with the underlying musk of creatures that have never known human dominion. Artemis's origin story involves one of the more impressive displays of divine multitasking in mythological history. When her mother Leto was pregnant with twins, Hera's jealousy prevented her from giving birth on any land touched by the sun. Leto finally found refuge on the floating island of Delos, where she delivered Artemis first. The newborn goddess immediately assisted with the birth of her twin brother Apollo, displaying the kind of competence that would make modern midwives weep with envy. It's like being born with a medical degree and immediately using it to help deliver your own sibling, which explains why Artemis became the patron goddess of childbirth despite her eternal virginity. Huntress's relationship with her brother Apollo operates on a level of sibling cooperation that would be impressive if it weren't occasionally interrupted by epic family drama. They share complementary roles in the cosmic order. He brings the light of day. She governs the mysteries of night. Their personalities reflect this division, with Apollo representing the rational, civilized aspects of divine power, while Artemis embodies the wild, instinctual forces that exist beyond human control. When they work together, they're unstoppable. When they disagree, the results can be catastrophic for any mortals unfortunate enough to be caught in the crossfire. You witness the goddess's famous temper firsthand when she discovers a group of hunters who have been killing her sacred deer without proper ritual observances. The punishment she inflicts is swift and creative. The offenders find themselves transformed into the very animals they've been hunting, forced to experience the terror of being prey rather than predators. It's a form of justice that operates on multiple levels, teaching empathy while simultaneously removing the threat to her woodland charges. The transformation is permanent, which seems harsh until you consider that she's literally creating new wildlife to replace what was destroyed, maintaining the ecological balance through divine intervention. The goddess's famous vow of eternal virginity isn't just a personal choice. It's a political statement about feminine independence in a world dominated by male gods who view women primarily as romantic conquests or breeding partners. Artemis carved out a sphere of influence where she answers to no one, male or female, and where her female followers can find refuge from unwanted marriages, abusive relationships, and the social expectations that limit women's opportunities. Her band of huntresses represents an early example of feminine separatism, where women support each other in pursuing goals that have nothing to do with romantic relationships or domestic responsibilities. The practical challenges of maintaining eternal virginity while surrounded by gods who view sexual conquest as a competitive sport require constant vigilance and creative problem solving. Artemis has developed a reputation for punishments that are both memorable and educationally valuable. When the hunter Actaeon accidentally saw her bathing, she transformed him into a stag and allowed his own hunting dogs to tear him apart, a consequence that seems extreme, until you consider that he was probably the 1,000th man who'd accidentally stumbled upon her private moments. The story serves as both a cautionary tale about respecting boundaries and a practical demonstration of what happens when you mistake a goddess for an ordinary woman. Historians still argue whether Artemis's myths represent ancient memories of matriarchal societies, symbolic representations of natural cycles, or early feminist literature disguised as religious stories. The goddess embodies aspects of human experience that often get overlooked in male-dominated mythologies: the power of female friendship, the importance of wilderness preservation, and the value of choosing purpose over conventional social expectations. Her stories consistently emphasize themes of protection, independence, and the consequences of disrespecting the natural world. The hunt continues deeper into the forest, where you encounter creatures that exist only in the liminal spaces between civilization and wilderness. A silver stag with antlers that sparkle like stars leads you toward a clearing where moonlight pools like liquid mercury. The stag's eyes hold intelligence that transcends ordinary animal awareness, and you realize you're in the presence of one of Artemis's special charges, a creature that bridges the gap between the mortal and divine realms. The goddess reaches out to touch the stag's nose, and for a moment, you glimpse the profound connection between the huntress and the wild world she protects. As the hunt reaches its climax, you understand that you've participated in something more complex than simple predator-prey dynamics. Artemis's hunting serves multiple purposes. It maintains ecological balance, provides her followers with necessary survival skills, and creates opportunities for spiritual communion with the natural world. The goddess doesn't hunt for sport or sustenance. She hunts as a form of sacred service, removing threats to the wilderness while honoring the cycles of life and death that keep ecosystems healthy. The silver arrows that fly from her bow carry with them the authority of natural law, ensuring that even death serves the greater purpose of maintaining the balance between civilization and wildness. You're entering Aphrodite's palace, where the very architecture seems designed to lower inhibitions and encourage poor decision-making. The walls shimmer with an opalescent finish that changes color based on the romantic potential of everyone in the room, creating a living mood ring effect that makes privacy impossible and subliminal seduction inevitable. Rose petals fall from the ceiling in a constant gentle shower, their scent carrying pheromones that affect both gods and mortals with the subtlety of a perfume truck collision. The furniture appears to be upholstered in materials that are simultaneously the most comfortable and most suggestive textures known to any realm, making it impossible to sit down without feeling vaguely aroused and confused about why. Aphrodite herself reclines on a couch that seems to be made from crystallized desire, her beauty operating on a level that transcends normal aesthetic appreciation and enters the realm of psychological warfare. She's not just attractive, she's weaponized attraction, capable of making anyone fall in love with anything at any time for any reason she finds amusing. Her hair shifts color from gold to auburn to raven black, depending on the preferences of whoever's looking at her, while her eyes contain depths that suggest she's simultaneously the most innocent and most experienced being in existence. The goddess wears a belt called the cestus, which amplifies her natural charm to levels that could probably be classified as a controlled substance if the FDA had jurisdiction over divine accessories. The goddess of love's origin story involves more nudity and oceanic weirdness than most creation myths, which should have been a warning sign about her future influence on human relationships. According to the most popular version, she was born from the sea foam that formed when Kronos castrated his father Uranus and threw the severed parts into the ocean. This means the goddess of love and beauty literally emerged from the cosmic equivalent of a very violent divorce proceeding, which explains a lot about her approach to romance. She rose from the waves fully formed, riding a giant scallop shell, and immediately causing every male sea creature within 100-mile radius to develop inappropriate feelings about mollusks. You watch as Aphrodite reviews her daily schedule, which reads like a combination wedding planner, divorce attorney, and chaos coordinator. She's simultaneously orchestrating 12 different love triangles across the Mediterranean, arranging for 3 princesses to fall in love with completely inappropriate partners, and ensuring that at least one major war gets started because someone's girlfriend was prettier than someone else's wife. The goddess maintains detailed files on every romantic relationship in the known world, tracking compatibility ratings, potential for dramatic breakups, and the likelihood that any given couple will produce offspring suitable for starring in their own mythological adventures. Her son Eros, better known as Cupid, serves as both her primary assistant and her biggest headache. The young god of desire inherited his mother's power over romantic attraction, but lacks her strategic thinking and emotional intelligence. He's like a cosmic toddler with a bow and arrow, randomly shooting people, and then giggling when they fall in love with the nearest available target. The results are often hilarious from a divine perspective, but devastating for the mortals involved, who find themselves trapped in passionate relationships with people they've never met, animals they were previously planning to eat, or abstract concepts like mathematics. The goddess's relationship with her husband Hephaestus represents one of the most dysfunctional arranged marriages in mythological history. Zeus decided that the most beautiful goddess should marry the most skilled craftsman, presumably thinking that opposites attract, and that a relationship based on divine mandate would somehow work out better than ones based on mutual attraction. The result is a marriage where the gorgeous goddess of love is paired with a physically disabled blacksmith, whose idea of romance involves making her increasingly elaborate jewelry. It's like forcing a supermodel to marry a very talented but socially awkward engineer, then being surprised when she starts having affairs with literally everyone else in the pantheon. Aphrodite's most famous extramarital relationship involves Ares, the god of war, in a pairing that demonstrates the ancient Greeks' understanding of the connection between love and conflict. Their affair produces children who embody various aspects of romantic drama: Harmonia, harmony; Phobos, fear; and Deimos, terror. Names that accurately describe the emotional range of most relationships. The lovers' secret meetings are eventually discovered by Hephaestus, who creates an invisible net to trap them in bed together, then invites all the other gods to come and laugh at their embarrassment. It's the mythological equivalent of revenge porn, except with divine beings and consequences that affect the fundamental nature of human romantic experience. The goddess's influence on mortal affairs extends far beyond simple matchmaking into the realm of social engineering and psychological manipulation. She can make anyone fall in love with anything, which she uses to punish those who offend her reward those who honor her, and occasionally just stir up trouble because she's bored. Her victims include kings who fall in love with statues, heroes who develop passionate feelings for their own reflections, and philosophers who abandon logic in favor of writing terrible poetry about unrequited love. The goddess treats human emotion like a cosmic video game, where the objective is to create the most dramatic possible outcomes rather than promote healthy relationships. Historians still argue whether Aphrodite's myths represent ancient attempts to understand the psychology of attraction, warnings about the dangers of unchecked desire, or early examples of romantic comedy taken to mythological extremes. The goddess embodies the paradox of love itself, simultaneously the most beautiful and most destructive force in human experience. Her stories consistently emphasize that attraction is neither rational nor fair, that beauty can be a weapon as well as a gift, and that the line between love and obsession is often determined by factors beyond anyone's control. You notice that despite her reputation for causing chaos, Aphrodite also serves as a patron of legitimate marriages and healthy relationships. She rewards couples who demonstrate genuine affection, supports women in difficult childbirth, and occasionally intervenes to prevent romantic disasters when she's in a particularly benevolent mood. The goddess understands that love requires both passion and stability, desire and commitment, attraction and respect. Her more positive interventions often go unnoticed because successful relationships don't generate the kind of dramatic stories that get retold for thousands of years, but they represent the constructive side of her divine portfolio. As you prepare to leave Aphrodite's presence, you realize you've been exposed to more than just divine beauty. You've witnessed the personification of humanity's most complex and contradictory emotion. The goddess of love embodies our deepest desires and our most irrational fears, our capacity for both creation and destruction, our need for connection, and our tendency toward jealousy and possessiveness. The rose petals continue to fall as you move toward the next section of the palace, but you can still feel the lingering influence of her presence, like the memory of a perfect kiss or the echo of a broken heart. You're standing in the middle of what can only be described as the most uncomfortable family dinner in divine history, where the tension between Ares and Hephaestus has reached the point where the very air seems to crackle with suppressed violence and barely contained resentment. The war god sits at one end of the table, his muscular frame radiating the kind of aggressive energy that makes everyone else instinctively check the location of the nearest exits. His armor clanks softly with each movement, and the spear resting against his chair seems to pulse with its own malevolent life. Across from him, Hephaestus works methodically through his meal, his powerful hands moving with the precision of someone who spent millennia crafting weapons that could level mountains. The smith god's expression suggests he's calculating the exact tensile strength required to strangle someone with a dinner fork. The root of their conflict extends far beyond simple sibling rivalry into the realm of philosophical differences about the nature of power, honor, and what constitutes acceptable behavior when you discover your wife is having an affair with your brother. Aries represents the brutal, straightforward approach to conflict resolution. If someone offends you, you hit them with something heavy until they stop moving. Hephaestus embodies the more sophisticated strategy of patient planning, creative problem solving, and revenge that's so elaborate it becomes a form of performance art. Their personalities reflect different aspects of human conflict, with Aries embodying the immediate emotional response, while Hephaestus represents the calculated, long-term approach to settling scores. The famous incident that crystallized their animosity began when Hephaestus discovered that his wife Aphrodite was conducting an affair with Ares in their own marital bed. Rather than challenging the war god to direct combat, which would have been the traditional masculine response, the smith god decided to employ his superior craftsmanship and strategic thinking. He forged an invisible net of unbreakable chains, installed it above the bed, and waited for the next romantic rendezvous. The trap worked perfectly, capturing both lovers in a compromising position that left them unable to escape or maintain any dignity. It's like setting up a hidden camera, except the camera is made of divine metal, and the footage gets broadcast to every god in the pantheon. You watch as Hephaestus describes the technical specifications of his famous net, his voice taking on the enthusiastic tone of someone discussing a particularly successful engineering project. The chains were forged from metals that exist only in the divine realm, welded together with techniques that required temperatures equivalent to the core of a star. The timing mechanism was calibrated to activate at the precise moment of maximum embarrassment, ensuring that the trapped couple would be discovered in the most undignified position possible. The smith god's attention to detail extended to acoustic considerations. The net was designed to amplify any sounds the trapped couple might make, turning their protests into a form of involuntary performance art. The aftermath of the net incident reveals the complex social dynamics that govern divine society. When the other gods arrived to witness Ares and Aphrodite's humiliation, their reactions varied based on their individual relationships with the three principles. Apollo and Hermes found the situation hilarious, treating it like divine entertainment designed for their amusement. Poseidon was more concerned with the legal implications, questioning whether Hephaestus had the right to trap other gods without formal charges. The goddesses, led by Hera, boycotted the spectacle entirely, considering it beneath their dignity to participate in what amounted to cosmic slut-shaming. Ares' response to his public humiliation demonstrates both his limited strategic thinking and his commitment to solving problems through the application of overwhelming force. The war god's first instinct was to challenge Hephaestus to single combat, apparently believing that physical superiority would somehow retroactively justify his adultery. However, fighting the god who forges all the weapons used by gods and heroes presents certain logistical challenges. Hephaestus could simply create superior equipment for himself while ensuring that Ares's weapons would malfunction at critical moments. It's like challenging the person who controls your internet connection to a battle conducted entirely through online gaming. The ongoing conflict between the two gods affects their respective spheres of influence in ways that impact mortal civilization. Ares's domain of warfare becomes increasingly chaotic and destructive when his personal life is in turmoil, leading to conflicts that serve no strategic purpose beyond providing outlets for divine frustration. Hephaestus's craftsmanship takes on a more aggressive edge, with his weapons becoming more deadly and his defensive technologies more sophisticated. The smith god channels his marital anger into creating increasingly elaborate tools of destruction, while Ares responds by finding new ways to test these weapons on unfortunate mortals. Historians still argue whether the Ares-Hephaestus conflict represents a commentary on different approaches to masculinity, a primitive explanation for the relationship between technology and warfare, or an early example of domestic drama elevated to mythological significance. The story contains elements that speak to universal human experiences: the pain of betrayal, the desire for revenge, the conflict between emotional and rational responses to personal injury. Their ongoing feud serves as a reminder that even unlimited power can't resolve the fundamental challenges of human relationships, and that some conflicts are too personal to be settled through divine intervention. You notice that despite their mutual antagonism, both gods continue to perform their essential functions in the cosmic order. Ares still inspires courage in battle and ensures that conflicts are resolved through strength rather than endless negotiation. Hephaestus continues to create the tools and technologies that make civilization possible, from simple farming implements to the complex machinery that powers divine industry. Their personal hatred enhances rather than diminishes their professional performance, suggesting that conflict can serve constructive purposes when properly channeled. The dinner conversation gradually shifts from accusations and threats to more practical concerns about their respective responsibilities. Ares mentions his upcoming involvement in a mortal war where the outcome will determine the fate of 3 separate kingdoms. Hephaestus describes his current project involving improvements to Zeus's lightning bolts, which apparently need regular maintenance to prevent them from becoming unstable. Their ability to conduct business, despite their personal animosity, demonstrates a level of professionalism that would be impressive if it weren't occasionally interrupted by attempts to poison each other's wine. As you prepare to leave the war god and smith god to their eternal conflict, you realize you've witnessed something more complex than simple divine dysfunction. The relationship between Ares and Hephaestus embodies the tension between destruction and creation, between emotional reaction and strategic planning, between the immediate satisfaction of violence and the long-term benefits of patient craftsmanship. Their conflict serves as a reminder that even the gods struggle with the same fundamental challenges that plague human relationships, and that some problems are too deeply rooted in personality and history to be resolved through divine intervention or superior technology. You're standing in a field that stretches to the horizon, where the golden wheat that once waved in abundant rows now lies withered and brown, crackling underfoot like the remnants of a cosmic bonfire. The air carries the scent of decay and the promise of famine, while the sky above has taken on the gray, lifeless color of old ash. Demeter, the goddess of agriculture and harvest, kneels among the dying crops with tears that fall like acid rain, each drop burning away another season's worth of growth. Her grief is so profound that it's affecting the fundamental processes that sustain life on Earth, turning the reliable cycle of planting and harvest into a global catastrophe that threatens to end human civilization through starvation. The goddess's anguish stems from the abduction of her daughter Persephone, who was gathering flowers in a meadow when the earth suddenly split open and Hades, lord of the underworld, emerged in his dark chariot to claim her as his queen. The kidnapping was accomplished with the kind of dramatic flair that seems to run in the family. No simple invitation to dinner, no courtship period, no opportunity for the victim to express her preferences about relocating to the realm of the dead. Instead, Hades simply grabbed the girl and disappeared back into the earth, leaving behind only a scattered bouquet of flowers and a mother whose reaction would reshape the relationship between the living and the dead for all eternity. Demeter's search for her missing daughter reads like a mythological version of a missing person investigation, except the investigator has the power to withhold food from the entire human population until her demands are met. The goddess abandons her agricultural responsibilities and wanders the earth in disguise, questioning everyone she meets about her daughter's whereabouts. Her travels take her from the palaces of kings to the cottages of peasants, from sacred groves to marketplaces, always asking the same desperate question: have you seen my daughter? The emotional weight of her loss transforms her from a benevolent provider into a figure of terrifying maternal fury, demonstrating that even gods can be driven to extremes by the pain of losing a child. You witness the gradual collapse of agricultural systems as Demeter's grief deepens into a depression that affects every growing thing on earth. The wheat stops ripening, the fruit trees refuse to bear, and even the wild plants that grow without human intervention begin to wither and die. The goddess's emotional state is directly linked to the fertility of the soil, making her personal trauma a global crisis that threatens to end human civilization through starvation. It's like having the world's food supply controlled by someone who's going through the worst possible version of empty nest syndrome, except the nest is literally empty because someone kidnapped the bird. The theological implications of Demeter's strike are staggering. The goddess is essentially holding humanity hostage until the other gods help her recover her daughter, demonstrating that even divine beings can be driven to desperate measures by parental love. Her actions raise questions about the relationship between divine benevolence and divine self-interest, suggesting that the gods' willingness to help mortals is contingent on their own emotional needs being met. The fact that she's willing to let millions of people starve to death in order to pressure Zeus into action reveals a darker side of divine psychology that makes their human-like emotions seem less charming and more terrifying. Zeus's response to the agricultural crisis demonstrates his skills as a crisis manager and his understanding of the delicate balance required to maintain both cosmic order and family harmony. He can't simply order Hades to return Persephone, because that would undermine the authority of the underworld and potentially destabilize the entire divine power structure. However, he also can't allow Demeter to destroy human civilization, because the gods depend on mortal worship and sacrifice for their own sustenance. The king of the gods finds himself mediating between his brother's desire for companionship and his sister's maternal instincts, while trying to prevent the collapse of the ecosystem that supports all life on Earth. The resolution of the crisis involves a compromise that's simultaneously elegant and tragic. Persephone can return to the surface world, but only after Hades tricks her into eating pomegranate seeds that bind her to the underworld for part of each year. The number of seeds she consumed determines how long she must spend with her husband versus how long she can spend with her mother, creating a seasonal cycle that explains why winter exists and why spring returns. It's like the world's most consequential custody arrangement, where the emotional needs of three divine beings determine the agricultural calendar that governs human survival. Historians still argue whether the Demeter-Persephone myth represents ancient memories of agricultural societies, primitive explanations for seasonal changes, or sophisticated commentary on the relationship between life and death. The story contains elements that speak to universal human experiences: the pain of losing a child, the conflict between different forms of love, the way grief can transform nurturing instincts into destructive impulses. The myth's focus on the mother-daughter relationship provides a rare example of female emotional experience taking center stage in a male-dominated mythological tradition. You observe the first signs of spring's return as Demeter's reunion with Persephone begins to heal the wounded earth. The goddess's tears of joy carry healing properties that penetrate the soil, awakening dormant seeds and encouraging new growth. The withered crops begin to show patches of green, and the air gradually warms from the frigid temperatures that have characterized the first winter in human history. However, the happiness is tempered by the knowledge that this reunion is temporary, that Persephone must return to the underworld when the appointed time arrives, and that the cycle of separation and reunion will continue for all eternity. The establishment of the seasonal cycle creates a new rhythm for human existence, one that acknowledges the fundamental connection between emotional states and natural processes. Demeter's annual grief and joy become the driving forces behind planting and harvest, dormancy and growth, and rebirth. The goddess's personal trauma transforms into a cosmic principle that governs the relationship between life and death, teaching humanity that some losses are permanent while others are cyclical, that some separations are final while others are temporary interruptions in ongoing relationships. As you prepare to leave Demeter's presence, you realize you've witnessed more than just a divine family crisis. You've observed the creation of one of the most fundamental patterns in human experience. The cycle of seasons becomes a metaphor for the emotional cycles that govern human existence, the way loss and recovery, grief and joy, separation and reunion create the rhythm that gives meaning to temporal existence. The goddess's story serves as a reminder that even the most nurturing relationships can be disrupted by forces beyond our control, and that sometimes the most profound love manifests as the willingness to let go when necessary. You're descending through the entrance to the underworld, where the air grows thick with the weight of eternity, and the sound of your footsteps echoes with the finality of a closing door. The path beneath your feet is worn smooth by countless souls who have made this journey before you, their passage polished into the stone like a river of departed hopes and dreams. The temperature drops with each step, not from cold, but from the absence of warmth, as if the very concept of heat has been gradually leached away by the proximity of so much accumulated death. Ahead, the river Styx flows with water that's somehow darker than the surrounding darkness, its surface reflecting nothing, while simultaneously seeming to absorb all light that dares to approach. Charon, the ferryman of the dead, operates his boat with the mechanical precision of someone who's been performing the same job for millennia without vacation time or customer service training. His appearance suggests what would happen if a scarecrow gained consciousness and decided to specialize in transportation logistics for the deceased. The coins placed on the eyes of the dead serve as fare for this crossing, creating an economy where the only currency is the final tribute paid by the living to ensure their loved ones can afford the journey to their eternal rest. The ferryman's conversation skills are limited to grunts and the occasional demand for correct change, making him perhaps the most efficient customer service representative in any realm. The geography of the underworld reflects a bureaucratic approach to death that would make modern government agencies weep with envy. The realm is divided into distinct sections based on the moral quality of the deceased's earthly life, with each area designed to provide appropriate eternal consequences for temporal behavior. The fields of Asphodel house the majority of souls, those who lived ordinary lives without committing spectacular sins or performing heroic deeds. It's like a cosmic middle management division where the deceased spend eternity in a state of neutral existence that's neither particularly pleasant nor deliberately unpleasant, just endlessly, inevitably ordinary. Elysium, the paradise reserved for heroes and the exceptionally virtuous, resembles a divine country club where the membership requirements include having your name remembered in epic poetry. The residents enjoy eternal youth, perfect weather, and access to recreational activities that would be impossible in the mortal realm. However, the exclusivity of this paradise raises uncomfortable questions about the relationship between fame and virtue, suggesting that being remembered by poets might be more important than actual moral behavior. It's like having a VIP section in the afterlife, where the bouncers are mythological figures, and the cover charge is paid in legendary deeds rather than currency. Tartarus, the prison for the most serious offenders, operates on the principle that divine justice requires creative punishment that matches the specific nature of each crime. Sisyphus pushes his boulder up the mountain. For eternity, Tantalus reaches for fruit that always retreats beyond his grasp, and the Danaids fill jars with water that pours out as quickly as it's added. These punishments serve as both individual consequences and public warnings, demonstrating that certain forms of behavior will result in eternal inconvenience of the most frustrating possible variety. It's like having a cosmic department of corrections run by someone with an advanced degree in poetic justice and unlimited time to develop increasingly elaborate disciplinary measures. Hades himself rules this realm from a throne carved from obsidian and regret, his crown fashioned from metals that exist only in the deepest parts of the earth. The Lord of the Dead embodies the inevitability of mortality, while simultaneously serving as the ultimate administrator of divine justice. His personality combines the gravitas of a Supreme Court judge with the practical efficiency of someone who's processed millions of souls and developed streamlined procedures for handling the deceased. Unlike his more dramatic brothers, Hades rarely leaves his realm, making him simultaneously the most stable and most mysterious member of the divine family. The underworld's administrative systems reveal a sophisticated understanding of the relationship between justice and mercy, punishment and redemption. The three judges of the dead Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus evaluate each soul based on their earthly behavior, but their verdicts can be appealed through various means that involve divine intervention, heroic rescue missions, or the kind of legal technicalities that would make modern lawyers proud. The system acknowledges that morality exists on a spectrum rather than in absolute categories, and that even the dead deserve due process before being assigned their eternal accommodations. Witness the processing of recently deceased souls, each one arriving with their own story of triumph, tragedy, or simple human complexity. The evaluation process involves reviewing the complete record of their earthly existence, weighing their actions against their intentions, and considering the circumstances that shaped their choices. Some souls arrive with obvious destinations, heroes bound for Elysium, villains destined for Tartarus, but most require careful deliberation to determine appropriate placement. The judges' discussions reveal the challenge of applying universal moral principles to individual circumstances, especially when dealing with lives that contain both noble and selfish elements. Historians still argue whether the Greek underworld represents primitive attempts to understand death, sophisticated commentary on the relationship between morality and consequences, or elaborate wishful thinking about the existence of posthumous justice. The realm's detailed geography and complex administrative structure suggest that the ancient Greeks devoted considerable intellectual energy to questions about what happens after death, how moral behavior should be rewarded or punished, and whether the universe contains some form of ultimate justice that transcends the apparent randomness of mortal existence. The underworld's most famous resident, Persephone, brings a touch of seasonal change to the realm of eternal stasis. Her annual return to the surface world creates a rhythm that connects the land of the dead with the world of the living, suggesting that death and life exist in a continuous cycle rather than as opposite states. The queen of the underworld embodies the possibility of transformation and renewal, even in a realm defined by permanence and finality. Her presence reminds both gods and mortals that even death cannot completely separate the living from the dead, that some connections transcend the boundaries between realms. The deeper regions of the underworld contain secrets that predate the current cosmic order, remnants of earlier divine regimes, and primordial forces that shaped the universe before the Olympian gods claimed power. These ancient elements operate according to laws that even Zeus cannot fully control, suggesting that the underworld serves as a repository for cosmic forces that are too fundamental to be eliminated, but too dangerous to be allowed free rein. The realm's stability depends on maintaining the balance between these primordial elements and the more recent administrative structures imposed by Hades and his judicial system. As you begin your ascent back to the surface world, you realize you've experienced more than just divine tourism. You've witnessed the intersection of mortality and eternity, justice and mercy, individual choice and cosmic consequence. The underworld serves as both a destination and a mirror, reflecting the moral complexities of human existence while providing a framework for understanding the relationship between temporal actions and eternal consequences. The darkness gradually gives way to the familiar light of the surface world, but the weight of what you've witnessed remains, a reminder that death gives meaning to life by providing both an endpoint and a context for evaluating the choices made during our brief time in the sunlight. You're standing at the crossroads where divine power meets human ambition, watching as legendary figures emerge from the intersection of godly intervention and mortal determination. The heroes gathering before you represent humanity's attempt to bridge the gap between earthly limitations and cosmic possibilities, each one carrying the burden of impossible quests and the hope of achieving something that transcends ordinary human experience. Their stories unfold like epic poems written in sweat, blood, and the kind of stubborn persistence that either leads to immortal glory or spectacular failure, with very little middle ground between those extremes. Hercules approaches first, his massive frame carrying the weight of 12 labors that were designed to be impossible even for someone with divine strength coursing through his veins. You watch as he hefts his olive-wood club, the same weapon that helped him strangle the Nemean lion with his bare hands when conventional weapons proved useless against its impenetrable hide. The hero's backstory reads like a tragedy penned by the gods themselves. Born from Zeus's affair with the mortal Alcmene, he became the target of Hera's vindictive fury from the moment he drew his first breath. Remember how petty that goddess could be when her husband's wandering eye created yet another reminder of his infidelity. Well, Hercules bore the brunt of her cosmic tantrum for his entire existence. The madness Hera inflicted upon him led to the unthinkable, the killing of his own wife and children in a fit of divine-induced insanity. You witness the moment when clarity returns to his eyes, the horror of realization washing over his face like a tide of pure anguish. It's the kind of guilt that would crush an ordinary mortal, but Hercules channels it into something approaching redemption through the oracle of Delphi's decree. Serve his cowardly cousin Eurystheus for 12 years, completing whatever labors the king demands. The irony isn't lost on you that the strongest man in the world must submit to someone who probably couldn't lift a decent-sized rock without throwing out his back. You follow him through the Augean stables, where 30 years of divine cattle droppings have created what might generously be called an agricultural nightmare. Historians still argue whether Hercules actually rerouted 2 rivers to clean the stables in a single day, or if this represents some ancient metaphor for political reform. But you're pretty sure the smell alone would have motivated creative solutions. The hero's ingenuity shines through each impossible task, capturing the Erymanthian boar, stealing the golden apples from the Garden of the Hesperides, dragging Cerberus from the underworld for a brief and terrifying playdate with the living world. Perseus glides past on his winged sandals, Hermes' gift, enabling him to soar through the Mediterranean sky like ancient Greece's answer to a superhero. You observe him clutching Medusa's severed head in a special bag, because apparently even heroes need proper storage solutions for weapons of mass petrification. His quest began with King Polydectes' transparent attempt to get rid of him, so he could pursue Perseus' mother Danae without interference. A classic case of go, fetch me something impossible, so I can hit on your mom while you're gone. The fact that Perseus actually succeeded probably wasn't part of the king's original plan. The hero's adventure reads like a divine shopping list. Magical items from helpful gods, directions from the Grease sisters, who shared one eye between them. Talk about sibling cooperation taken to extremes, and a strategy for killing something whose gaze literally turns people to stone. You watch him approach the sleeping Medusa, using her reflection in Athena's polished shield, the same goddess who helped orchestrate this entire monster-hunting expedition. The moment of decapitation releases not just the threat of petrification, but also Pegasus, the winged horse that springs fully formed from the Gorgon's blood. Because apparently even death scenes in Greek mythology need to include surprise births. Theseus joins the gathering, his reputation built on voluntarily walking into the labyrinth of Crete to face the Minotaur, a creature that was half man and half bull, with entirely too much appetite for human flesh. You witness him following Ariadne's thread through the maze, a simple solution to a complex problem that makes you wonder why nobody thought of it before. The princess's infatuation with the handsome hero provided both the means of navigation and the tragic abandonment that would follow his victory, because apparently even successful monster slaying doesn't guarantee relationship success in the ancient world. The hero's political achievements in Athens often get overshadowed by his monster fighting resume, but you observe him unifying the scattered settlements of Attica into a single city-state, establishing the democratic foundations that would later influence Western civilization. His adventures continue well into middle age, including an ill-advised journey to the underworld with his friend Pirithous to kidnap Persephone, which goes about as well as you'd expect any plan involving romantic theft from the Lord of the Dead. Historians still argue whether Theseus actually existed as a historical figure or represents a composite of several ancient rulers, but his impact on Athenian identity remains undeniable. You notice how these heroes share common threads despite their different origins and quests: divine parentage or favor, impossible tasks that test both strength and cleverness, and the kind of personal tragedies that would make modern therapists rich. They represent humanity's eternal struggle to transcend limitations, to achieve something worthy of the gods' attention, even when that attention comes with a hefty price tag in suffering and sacrifice. Their stories echo through time because they capture the essence of human ambition, the desire to be more than ordinary mortals while remaining fundamentally, beautifully human. Jason arrives with his Argonauts, their ship bristling with heroes who have answered the call to seek the Golden Fleece in distant Colchis. You watch them navigate the clashing rocks, those terrifying stone sentinels that crush ships foolish enough to attempt passage. Their successful transit marked by the loss of only the ship's tail ornament, a remarkably positive outcome for a quest that seemed designed to eliminate heroes through creative forms of maritime disaster. The expedition becomes a showcase of cooperative heroism, each member contributing unique skills to overcome obstacles that would overwhelm any individual, no matter how divinely blessed. The relationships between these legendary figures create a web of mentorship, rivalry, and mutual respect that spans generations. You observe how Hercules' strength complements Perseus' cunning, how Theseus' political wisdom balances Jason's leadership qualities, how their shared experiences of divine interference and mortal consequences forge bonds stronger than bronze. They understand each other's burdens in ways that ordinary mortals never could, united by the unique pressures of living up to impossible expectations, while navigating the treacherous waters of godly politics and human emotions. As the evening light fades around these legendary figures. You feel the weight of their stories settling gently into your consciousness, like whispered secrets from an ancient world. The heroes begin to blur at the edges, their mighty deeds transforming into the soft rhythm of shared human experience, the eternal quest for meaning and purpose that connects you to them across thousands of years. Their footsteps echo more softly now, bronze weapons glinting like distant stars in the growing darkness. You watch as Hercules' club becomes a walking stick, as Perseus' winged sandals carry him gently toward the horizon, as Theseus' thread unravels into the silver path of moonlight on still water. The gods who shaped their destinies retreat to their celestial heights, leaving behind only the gentle whisper of wind through olive groves and the distant sound of waves against ancient shores. The stories themselves seem to breathe now, inhaling your attention and exhaling the timeless comfort of human courage in the face of impossible odds. You feel yourself becoming part of this mythological tapestry, your own dreams woven into the fabric of these ancient adventures. Your sleeping mind ready to explore realms where heroes walk among gods and mortals, achieve immortality through deeds that echo through eternity. The last hero fades into the distance, leaving you alone with the peaceful darkness and the profound satisfaction of having witnessed humanity's greatest aspirations made manifest in stories that will never truly end. Rest now, knowing that these legends live on in every act of courage, every quest for justice, every moment when ordinary people choose to be extraordinary. Sleep well, dreamer of ancient dreams.